Okay, are all the translators in place? Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Good. So we say Losa Tashidele, good wishes for the new year. New years are important because it gives us a kind of parsing or interruption to the flow of time, a new beginning. From the excuse me, from the point of view of Dzogchen, every moment is a new beginning. The importation of the past into the present and into the future is a mental activity. What do we need for the next moment? Well, it depends on what kind of moment it's going to be. So each of us is here in our own body, in your life with your possessions, your intentions, your work, and so on. We have a felt sense inside ourselves of how we're doing. We can compare how we are today with yesterday and with a year ago. That is to say, we compare our idea of how we were yesterday or a year ago with our idea about how we are now. Comparing and contrasting is always a mental activity. So, say we go to a nice cafe. You order one cake, I order another. I have a spoon of your cake, you have a spoon of my cake. Which is better? Well, I have a taste in my mouth, but it's quite difficult to catch the quality of this taste. I might say, oh, that cake is very sweet. It's too sweet for me. That is to say, my idea about what is sweet and what is not sweet is the means by which I evaluate how the cake is. And of course, that evaluation is influenced by the kind of food we had as a child, what sort of cakes or biscuits our mother made, and so on. Now, musicians can tune a guitar to a particular note, particular, mm, and generally they can agree whether the guitar is well tuned or not, because the criteria for that evaluation is uh, out there. It's, if you like, objective. Of course, it's a subjective feeling that lets us know whether it's exactly on the right point or not. So even when something like striking the chord seems to deliver an accurate, objective access to how it is, there is some interpretation involved. So often with small children, they like to wear a particular kind of clothing because they feel that this clothing expresses themselves. So the small person wants to go out in their pajamas. And mom is saying, no, this is for bed. This is not for going out. And the child says, but I like it. The main criteria for my life is me. I like it. I don't like it. So this opens up many questions. What criteria can we reliably use to get an accurate perception of our situation? What I take to be my direct feeling has also been influenced by the dependent origination of being born at a particular time, in a particular culture, in a particular family, and therefore I have internalized many of these criteria. It's very important for us to investigate this. What was other, what was our family culture, becomes us as we bring it into ourselves and massage it into ourselves. because the basic uncertainty of our ego self can be supported and reassured by having a degree of object constancy. That is to say, if I have repeated exposure to certain people with particular beliefs, then I will feel quite safe. So if I like what I know, then maybe I know what I like. And we think, oh, this is how it is. And that makes us feel safe and secure. Until Donald arrives. Because for Donald, chaos is normal. The sense that other people don't know. That they're waiting on tiptoe, anxiously wondering, what is he going to do now? And this is strengthened by the habit of inventing facts, of saying that what I believe is true. So what can I rely on? On politicians, on economists, on the hospital system. The more we see how interdependent all the constitutive factors of these situations is, then we have to try harder to really hold on to what is safe. And yet the patterning of events keeps changing. We see the climate changes, the world economic system changes, the kind of political views that people feel confident in expressing change over time. It's a moving world. How can I stay with the movement of the world? There are so many factors going on that if I adjust for one set of factors, I'm not going to be in harmony with other factors. So this brings us to this crossroads, which is set out in the title for today, which is effortful selectivity or effortless non-selectivity. When I start with the assumption that I exist, I am this person with this personality, these qualities, capacities, and so on, I start with a definition of myself. I am a knowable entity. So I have to monitor how I am. I have to make effort to stay in touch with the patterning of my life. And of course, this can be quite disturbing because the patterning of my life is not coming from me. My ego self is not the master of my patterning. So today I'm sitting very close to my roll of toilet paper because it is the great friend of the river which flows out of my nose. I didn't invite my nose to provide this stream of snot. My body, my nose, my cold. But I didn't do it. So my life comes to me. Many different factors feed into the manifestation of the particular patterning of how I am today. And because these are dynamic interactive factors, the patterning of what presents as I, me, myself is changing. And yet I have a sense of the continuity of myself. I can see that my posture, my gesture, my way of speaking, whether my mind feels a bit foggy with the cold or not, all of these factors constitute the quality of my experience of myself. And yet, somehow, essentially, I feel like me. I am. Sometimes I am healthy. Sometimes I am suffering from some sickness. These conditions modify how this basic existence, this I amness, expresses itself. So I want to be happy and not sad. So I need to select the factors that will bring happiness rather than sadness. Now, my body is in a state they call pre-diabetic. This is what the doctor says. For me, I would like to eat some chocolate. I feel a direct connection with chocolate. I know I will like the chocolate, but the chocolate is not good for me because I am pre-diabetic. So I am a person who likes chocolate and who is pre-diabetic. So can I ride two horses at once? Bit of chocolate, but try to keep healthy. So we have a chocolate and then we have a broccoli antidote because I want both. But it's either or. And the doctor says, no sugar, no honey, nothing sweet. It's not good for you. Watch out for carbohydrate. So who is it that is pre-diabetic? On the basis of the information from the doctor, I have to say I am, but I don't feel it. It's not a kind of feeling that I know. I know happy, sad, lonely, enthusiastic. They seem to relate to me. But pre-diabetic, it's a bit abstract. So when I engage in my effortful selectivity, trying to choose the right things for me, this involves managing the complexity of my felt experience of how I am, that is to say, I, me, myself. If there is some chocolate and I see it and I want to eat it, that seems a very direct relationship. I see other people eating the chocolate. Oh, but I should not eat it because I am in this state of pre-diabetic. That is to say, through the blood test, through the conversation with the doctor, I know something about myself. I also have direct impulses or habit formations which lead me to the object of my desire. So not only do I have a medical condition, but I have the big shadow of the doubt as to whether I can trust what feels instinctively right for me. How could something that tastes as good as chocolate be bad for me? I can't trust my own senses. So when we're thinking about developing our lives, what is the basis for our evaluation of our current situation? Very often we experience that we would prefer to live in a world of magic. So we might decide that we want to learn a language, say Tibetan. It's a wonderful idea. I'll be able to read these Buddhist texts. I'm going to do this. An unimpeded intention. But like a horse that's not so healthy, I fall at the first jump in the race. Because there are a lot of words to remember the meaning of. Many of the words sound very similar. So my intention to develop myself by learning Tibetan brings me to the first stage, which is to feel very stupid because I don't understand how it works. I want I want to expand my boundary. I want to have unimpeded movement. But I find that there is a limit embedded in the new learning tasks because they are cumulative. So then maybe I decide I'll learn 10 words every day. That seems possible. But I don't feel so well. I'll do it tomorrow. Who decided I will learn 10 words a day? I did. And yet, today I'm tired, so I'm not in the mood. These experiences are very helpful for us on our Dharma path. Because what they indicate, if we truly look at them, is that I am unreliable. My sense of myself is that I inhabit this body. This is the site or the basis for my activity, and I go from my body, with my body, into the world in pursuit of what I want. I am unreliable. That could be an encouragement to try harder. Life is hard. You have to make effort, keep working, push through. But if I'm going to manifest my energy, if I'm going to have an effortful, conscious, diligent orientation towards the task, then that will require my sense of self to be stable. So here we have, again, a choice. We have the path of effortful alignment. That is to say, we start with the map, which is a description of the possibility of the situation. So I'll learn 10 words of Tibetan every day, and on a Sunday, I'll put aside 2 hours to look at the grammar and try to translate some simple sentences. I want to do this. I want to learn. But then I feel tired or sick, and the tired, sick one doesn't want to learn. So at that moment, I can have an empathic attunement with my embodied situation. And I see, actually, I'm not able to do this today. From the point of view of Dzogchen practice, that's very helpful. If it's not ripe, if the balance of myself and my situation is not harmonious, why would I try to push through? If I push through, I privilege the object direction. I'm going to learn the Tibetan. But I do this at the expense of the subjective situation. So from the point of view of Dzogchen, acting towards yourself with violence is just as bad as acting towards any other living form with violence. It's better if we can work with circumstances. I don't feel like doing it today, or I don't feel able to do it today. This is like a fuse going on a small circuit. But now with modern wiring, we have a reset button. So we press the button and the circuit is completed again. Must try harder, keep going. You'll get there slowly. This orientation you find a lot in the Theravadan tradition. It's not about the orientation being good or bad. We're trying to see what are the implications of it in terms of our availability to open to how it is. How I am is primary. This is my embodied availability. And the texts remind us again and again, don't be artificial. Don't set things up in an abstract way. Stay in touch with the concrete, with the actual. So the path of managed alignment, the paths whereby I bring myself into harmony with the traditional Dharma progression, these are paths of artificiality. And they arise because I know where I need to get to. I know what the desirable condition for myself is, and I know that I need to find the way to do that. That is to say, the map comes first. So you have that orientation in many aspects of Dharma. So if you practice Tantra, you have the preliminary practices, the Nundro, which take quite a while to do. This will be a good basis, a good preparation. The tradition knows what is good for you. This is containing. Somebody understands what is best for you to do. But on what basis do they say that? Because the ingredients are good. All the different aspects, taking refuge, developing the bodhisattva orientation, these are good. And the Lama has also done this when they were young. So they say, oh, this is very good. You must do this. They are the baker. And in front of you, they put a nice big chocolate cake. Eat it up. All the ingredients are wonderful. Okay, objectively, yes, but I am pre-diabetic. So objectively, it is pleasure, it is medicine, it is pure Dharma. Subjectively, it's not good because my body can't cope with the sugar. So this is the central area of our inquiry. Can I find the right map? Can I trust the right map? How will I know it's the right map for me? So from the object side, I might say, you are a sentient being. You have the 5 poisons. You have accumulated karmic tendencies. So this is a good path for you. That is to say, it starts with knowledge about me, and the teacher has this knowledge about me without knowing me. How do they know it's good? Because it is good, because it's Dharma. Dharma is pure. It cannot be bad. But I am pre-diabetic. It's not good for me. So that's a sign you have many problems. You have an impediment, a blockage to practicing the pure Dharma. So if you listen to this, you hear, my attention is being oriented outside towards the path, towards what I have to do, and not towards how I am. So in general, Buddhist paths begin with a knowledge about what it means to be a person or a dog or a frog. And then on the basis of that starting position, you can elaborate, you can apply lots of information that will tell you how to proceed. So objectively, I can say I've got a bit of a cold. How this is arising for me at the moment is I start to feel a kind of sensitivity in my throat. I can look at it in terms of what. Well, it's just some sensation. It's not very important. Or I can see it in terms of how it is. So there's a constriction coming in my throat. And I can hear the slight change in the tone of my voice. Is this irrelevant information? Don't pay attention to these things. Just get on with it. Do the main thing. Or, oh, this current situation, which feels like me, was not there before. Hopefully it will not be there in a day or two. It's not a permanent feature of my life. I don't know why it is occurring. How is it? So this is where we come to leaving the familiar. If I stay with my familiar approach, I tell myself what is happening. So when I was a child in cold, wet Scotland, I often had colds. And my mother would say, James, look, your nose is leaking again. And she would get a tissue to clean my nose. And I would be wriggling, no, okay, leave me alone. But she's putting this on my nose, blow your nose, blow your nose. So gradually I learned that I have to manage this body and all that can leak out of it, doing pee-pee in the right place, blowing my nose on the right piece of paper. And then you come in Dharma and you have to manage your mind. So you should try to adopt virtuous tendencies and concern for the benefit of others, and abandon selfish concern and putting yourself first. But it's difficult to know what is correct. I remember a long time ago seeing Kalu Rinpoche in India, and there were maybe 20 of us in his small place in Soneda, and he said, you shouldn't sit with your feet facing towards me, because it's very rude to point the soles of your feet towards someone else. So in Scottish culture, we don't worry about that. But when Kalu Rinpoche said it, he said it with the full force of Dharma. This is some terrible offense to point your feet towards the Guru. Oh. So then we think, oh, this is also a relative truth. This is some conventional idea which is passed from generation to generation. But is it true? Now I know this is a bad thing to do. I shouldn't do it. I know it is bad. I know it is bad because somebody told me. And if you want to be close to that person, you better not do what they say is bad. What can we trust? Life is short. We are going to die. We live in a time of increasing geopolitical uncertainty. If you were living in Sudan, conditions are not optimal for Dharma practice. Gaza is not an ideal place for a retreat. Peaceful places become destroyed. I feel safe here until the conditions change. Oh. So on the basis of situations that last for a short period of time, I can generate an enduring notion as to how the other person is, how I am, what is required. Effort follows knowledge. We have an idea of how to do something, and so we work with that. And when it feels familiar, then you just keep working at it. So, for example, in Nepal, the farmers, when they dig the land, the poor farmers, they didn't have horses to do this. They just did it themselves with a hoe with an instrument which was a big blade coming down and a very short handle. So they had to bend very low over the ground to dig. When I tried digging with that, I got a very, very sore back. And I interpreted the pain in my back as a sign that this is not a good way to proceed. But for these local farmers, this is what their father, their grandfather did. And so it's normal, it's what we do, and you just do it. So there you can see that the cultural belief in the normality of a way of proceeding binds people into a way of utilizing their body, which will have painful consequences later. We can get used to anything. People get used to chronic diseases, to being in prison. You find a way of managing your emotions in order to survive. So when we know this about ourselves, we might want to inquire into the nature of self-management. That I am working with the patterning of these mental factors, these memories, thoughts, plans, emotions. I'm working with them to try to install an image of how I think it should be. So for us in the Dharma, this is very important to see. We look at the wheel of life. We see the 6 realms, the high God realms, and then the human realms, animal realms, hell realms. And in each of these, the experience becomes normal. If there's too much pain, you're not able to think of any other options. And in the God realm, where there's endless pleasure, it's so nice. Why would you bother to think about any other options? But we are fortunate that at this time, for a brief period of time, we have a human body. And our human body allows us to have a wider range of experiences. And I see that how I am depends on circumstances. And if I really see that, then, oh, I am not a fixed entity. It seems that a cow is a cow is a cow. And you have a sense of how cows live and what they do. But we human beings have very varied kinds of movements through life. You know, cows eat grass every day. They don't have a thought, oh, what will I get from the shops? We have many more choices available to us as human beings than any of the creatures in the other realms. How shall I live? What shall I do? Should I study more? Should I go to India? Should I do a long retreat? What do I need? Now, when we look for ourselves, what do I need? We encounter the pattern of our personalities. Some people have a lot of energy and always had energy. Others get tired easily. Some people are often bored. Some people are never bored. So if you want to see how you are, and you observe these tendencies or patterns in your personality, it appears that you can establish some useful self-knowledge. But of course, these tendencies that we have maybe are not actual possessions. So I have my watch. I can strap it around my wrist. then I have my watch with me. That makes it useful. But do I have my sadness in the same way I have my watch? My sadness sometimes fills me when I see this wars and persecutions. It fills me. It is me. And yet it isn't me because I'm not always sad. So I can be so suffused by an experience that it is as if that moment of merger shows a definite truth. Sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm happy. These feeling tones, or these qualities of feeling, are aspects of who I am. Or are they? Do they define me? I feel sad. Now, today, due to circumstances. When I think of the children in the civil war in Sudan, their vulnerability, how they are attacked, I feel very sad. I feel sad. Yet it's arising with the remembrance of the tragedy in Sudan. Its structure is dependent origination. The sadness arises on the basis of the coming together of these factors of manifestation. The other, the sadness, comes into me. And yet it is my sadness. So is the sadness added onto me? Or does it fill me the way air can fill a balloon? This is something we can investigate for ourselves. As you experience the changes in your mood, in sensation in the body, maybe feeling a bit hungry or needing to go to the toilet or wanting to have a walk, we have these two things which are arising very closely together. The felt sense, this is me. This is how it is for me. And yet, this is how it is for me on the basis of my contact with these events. So, is my sadness something inherent, or is it relational? My sadness evoked by events which are outside of me. Because if what I take to be truly definitional of myself is in fact arising on the basis of many factors which are not me, then I have some confusion about identity. So if you want to really see how you are, it helps not to have a map. It helps not to have too much, not to spend too much time reflecting on how I might be, but rather simply to stay with the flow of experience. Happiness comes, happiness goes. While this feeling of happiness is around, this brings a particular mode of subjectivity in terms of my breathing, my posture, my gesture, and so on. So, say, for example, you're very poor. You can't afford to go to the theater. But you can go with a friend to a big clothes shop. And you can spend a couple of hours trying on different clothes. You could put on some jeans, or you could put on different t-shirts, or a red dress, or a green dress. Each thing you put on allows you to feel in a particular way. And then after a couple of hours, time to go. No money, so I don't buy any new clothes. This is how we practice meditation. We sit in the Dharma Dhatu, the great shop, shows many different garments we could put on. Blue memories, red plans, all kinds of garments, clothing arises. Now, you could adopt a policy of non-reactivity and just not get involved. Or you can try on that thought, feeling, memory with the clarity that it's not mine. I am entitled to try it on. I can see how I feel when I try it on, yet it's not mine and it's not me. And in that way, neither adopting nor rejecting, you can experience how subject and object move together. And that is a form of play. It's not so serious. So hopefully I've given you a kind of general introduction that can help you to move around in yourself a little bit and see new possibilities of understanding. And we take a half-hour break now. And in that process, you can observe yourself in different situations, doing different things, and stay with the immediacy of how it is for you. Okay, so we take a break now. Good. See you soon. Okay. So in Dzogchen, one of the basic perspectives is on what is the nature of the ground or the source or the basis. And it's said to be kada, completely pure, from the very beginning, always pure. That is like the mind of the Buddha. Or rather, it's the aspect of the mind of the Buddha which is not touched by anything. Traditional example for this is the energy quality of Dang, which is compared to taking a crystal ball and putting it on a piece of red cloth. When you do that, there is a slight red coloration that seems to suffuse the crystal ball. But the ball itself has not been modified or conditioned by the arising of this coloration. If you take the ball and you put it on green cloth, it will take on a greenish tint. So this is important to see because it means it's not a purity which has to defend itself by keeping appearances outside. The appearance is there, but it is in non-duality. It doesn't cause any mixture. Now, with that as a basis, when occurrences are arising and passing within this space of lucidity, how they show indicates the rich potential of the open empty ground, but the patterns don't define the open empty ground. So on this level, it's like a reflection arising in a mirror. The images arise, they are there, they have an impact, and yet they have no substance. Now, we experience that in ourselves. We have events which are occurring in our body, in our mind, in our emotions. Now, just as with a mirror, the reflection in the mirror and the emptiness of the mirror are not two things, they are non-dual. In a similar way, I have a cold. The cold comes into me, and I feel a bit heavy, a bit unclear. Is this a limitation? Or is it how it is? We booked this Saturday for the Zoom teaching, and by the time the date came round in the calendar, I have a cold. So there is James with a cold. So we could say that James's competence to teach is compromised by having a cold. I could do better. I could be clearer. So then I might feel bad. I want to apologize. Oh, if only I didn't have a cold, I could be more lucid. When I talk in this way, you can see the density which is evoked. I feel dull, and I am dull. I don't have the brightness which I can often experience. So as we look before the break, the key thing is, well, who is the subject? If the subject is James, someone who exists, then the cold is modifying the presentation of James. But if James, if the true nature of James is emptiness, is an ungraspable presence, then what we have is the open basis with the patterning of James and the sub-patterning of James with the cold. James and the cold are arising together. So if we step free of judgment, of the application of our systems of evaluation, good, bad, right, wrong, and we just stay with how it is, then it's just this. And what is this? Arising and passing all the time. So here we see this precious illumination of Dzogchen. Says, if you start as a thing, as an entity, as an existent, and then events act on you, and then you react to events, then you have a solidified, reified engagement in which there are many invitations to correct how you are, improve how you are, do it differently. And that is what happens with effortful selectivity. I need to compensate for the fact that I have a cold. So I see the cold as a limitation or a restriction, which I need to overcome if I can. There is me and the cold. When I get a cold, I am diminished. When I don't have a cold, I am more relaxed. So, as long as we start as an existent, we will be relying on a false basis or a false ground. I am this specific person. No one else is like me. We may be a bit similar, but I am unique. And therefore, I need to protect this terrain of myself, because it comes under attack from all sorts of forces, from family, from relationships, from work, from sickness, from war. I am a thing in a world of things. A dictionary definition of a thing is that which can be thought, that exists and can be thought of. So when we start from this sense, I am me, I know what I'm like, I have my life, and then we want to say, don't tell me what to do, I can find my own way, then life is quite lonely and difficult. There are too many options. How will I choose wisely? Because I'm living in my world, but in order to survive, I have to step into the big world. I have to go out, to go to the shops, go to work, earn money, and so on. And wherever I arrive, here I am. It's the same me. The me which is a construct, which is a story. Shall I tell you about my life? About all the things I have experienced? This gives some more texture and flavor to the sense I exist. And as long as we have our starting place as I exist, I am autonomous, I need to decide for myself, then life is difficult. So in the general teachings of Buddhism, they would say that this assumption that I exist as someone, as an individual, as a separate entity, this is the distortion of unawareness which is obscuring the truth of my experience. So within dualism, we're thinking of existence. I exist, you exist, how shall we relate together? But in Dzogchen, we are concerned with experience. Experience is instant and ungraspable, and yet impactful. It is undeniable. When we look at the basic notion of the 5 heaps or the 5 skandhas, these were taught by the Buddha as a way of showing that our assumption that we truly exist in and of ourselves is false. Our sense that we start from ourselves and then move out into the world in terms of what we like and don't like, the confidence and power of this orientation blinds us to the fact that it is a lie, a fabrication. We have a shape and color. This is our body. And our body is in a world of moving events, and so it generates feelings of liking, not liking, neutral. And on the basis of that, I have a selective perception. I attend to certain factors in the field and don't attend to others. And so the selectivity embedded in the very act of formulating what I perceive strengthens our commitment to cognitive interpretation with the use of concepts. For example, if you have a big tree near you, many different branches, even if there are not many leaves on the tree at this time of the year, if you try to apprehend the complexity of the movement of the branches and twigs, it's very difficult. It's so much easier to say it's a tree. It's an oak tree. Now we know what we're talking about. The oak tree is a kind of tree. I don't see the oak tree. I imagine the oak tree on the basis of the selective attention of perception and the elaboration that comes with association with past experience, objective learning, and so on. That is to say, the incredible rich diversity of the tree, which shows itself differently as I walk around it and see it from different angles and different heights. This rich complexity is too much for our dualistic consciousness. That is to say, the actual shaping, this amazing thing growing out of the ground, stretching up into the sky, it is beyond my apprehension. I can't get hold of it as it is. And that being the case, if I want to be efficient in my movement through the world, I start with a conceptual interpretation. So the fourth heap or skandha is the elaboration, the associations, the bringing together of bits of information which can be applied in the situation. And the fifth aspect is consciousness. So if I go for a walk with one of you, and we come in front of this tree, and we start to talk about the tree. Are we talking about the actuality of the treeness of what is there? Or are we talking about our concepts of the tree? And if it's the latter, then most probably we are starting with the abstract, with the notion of trees, and this particular tree is recognizable as a tree because it is niched inside the concept of tree. That is to say, I'm talking with you about our concepts of the tree. My thinking and my feeling and my speaking cannot actually touch or catch the tree. This is something really to investigate for yourself. People talk about going to the moon and collecting rocks, and it seems very meaningful what they plan to do. Now they find that there are these rare earths in Ukraine. So powerful countries want to have some of this precious ingredient. But even 50 years ago, nobody was thinking about these rare earths. Due to causes and conditions and the development of the electronic world, these rare metals and so on become very important. They were always there, but their meaning, their value is generated through dependent origination on the basis of our concept of what they can be used for. That is to say, the importance of these rare metals is not intrinsic to the rare metal, but to the arising of modern technology which requires these rare metals. So when people talk about these rare metals and how much money they might be worth, it would appear that their value is intrinsic in their objective material structure. But in fact, the value of these rare metals is extrinsic because it is part of the relational identity of the metal in a world where there is now a desire for these metals. So, if the meaning or value or truth of any appearance is not intrinsic, is not defined by some essential value, but it is more relational, then we see that this value is relative. It's not absolute or inherent. So now that we have these more troubles in Russia and Ukraine and America, the price of gold is going up because there could be some pressure on the stock market and shares could lose their value. So it's better to shift some money into gold. But gold is gold. It seems to have inherent value. It's just something beautiful in itself. But its value depends on transaction. Nothing has inherent value. Now, the great teacher of this is Donald Trump, the king of transactions. That is to say, he is concerned with exchange, with the deal, that I will give you this much and you give me that much. And we can come to a shared agreement of the value of this particular commodity at this time according to our wishes or desires. The concepts which have reassured people about NATO and mutual defense and democratic values and so on can be shown to be quite hollow and empty. This is not new in the world. We go back a couple of centuries, then if you are from an important family and you are a girl, then dad needs to find a good husband for you. So what are the qualities of a good husband? They have social status. They have money. That this potential marriage can bring mutual benefit between our two families. So, dear daughter, if you marry this man, this will be very beneficial. But daddy, I don't like him. I don't fancy him. That's not a relevant criteria. You are a daughter, must develop our family. So in this way, we can see that through the course of our lives, our status, our freedom, our identity is defined and redefined again and again by the differential factors of new situations. So we might feel that we are practicing Tibetan Buddhism, but the Chinese government is very determined to remove Tibetan Buddhism from Tibet. Not only that, but to remove Tibet from Tibet, because it's China. Why call it Tibet when it's China? And because it's China, why are you speaking Tibetan when you're in China? You should speak Chinese. So that's what we see. The force field of events, of identifications, generates particular patterns which seem to be the truth. So if we have this frame of reference, then well, how shall I live? So if I feel that I am a Tibetan Buddhist and I'm in Tibet and life is getting difficult, then maybe it's better I burn myself alive because I don't want to compromise my beliefs. Many monks and nuns have taken this drastic action. What else can I do? I am this. So here we see the dangers of over-identifying with any particular pattern. So in Pato Rinpoche's commentary on taking refuge, he says, having taken refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you should not abandon them even at the cost of your life. So I am willing to die for the Dharma. The last thing that the Dharma needs is your death. But I have made my vow. Trying to hold on to simple propositions of truth is like having an open candle in a stormy night. A vulnerable situation. Any political wind can blow and suddenly your identity is reduced or enhanced, and you find you're just a puppet in the semiotic world. So how will I choose how to live? When we are within the darkness, the obscuration of duality, we will not see clearly. We're starting in the wrong place, which is why in Dzogchen we focus on not identifying with any event or experience which occurs as being the truth or the site of our existence. Because if I say I am a Buddhist and I am willing to die for Dharma, this is a string of concepts. What does it mean to be a Buddhist? Do you remember the Buddha every minute of your life? Or just from time to time? And when you remember the Buddha and you feel like a Buddhist, do you become more Buddhist? I am really a Buddhist. But when we study Buddhism, we study emptiness. We study the absence of inherent existence. There's no such thing as Buddhism. Also, there's no way to be a Buddhist. It's not like saying I'm a footballer because I play a lot of football. Football is very clearly an activity. And if you are a professional footballer and you get a bad accident, then that's tragic. It could be the end of your identity because there is a performativity to it. And if you can't perform football, you're not a footballer. So is that the same for Dharma? What am I performing? Should I wear monk's robes? Wear symbols around my neck? Go on a pilgrimage? If I go to Mount Kailash, will I become more Buddhist? Then Buddhism would be a constructed identity, which it is. And some factors will make it easier to be a Buddhist, some other factors will make it less easy. This is the play of conceptualization, and it is a very, very long path to freedom. When we'll have a break for lunch soon, and when we come back, we'll look more at effortless non-selectivity, which is the true way of Dzogchen. Yet it's helpful to see the many wrong turnings you can take. Something occurs. It wasn't there before. It has come into existence. Now it is different. But was it ever what we thought it was? Recently, some countries like Finland and Sweden joined NATO because they perceived there was a direct danger to themselves. But will NATO protect these countries if big America doesn't stand behind NATO? Hopefully you get some flavor of the difficulty of effortful selectivity. What is important? Is it truly important? What is my basis for knowing that it's important? when we look at the patterns of voting in Western European countries and in North America, we find that not so proportionally to the population, not so many people vote for the winner. You can become the winner even though not many people like you. So, are you the true leader if many people don't want you to be the leader? You're called the leader, but you're not my leader. So who am I to say you, the great man, are not the leader? Much easier just to say, oh, he is the president. I can fall asleep in the concept. If he is the president, then he will do presidential things. He will be a serious, reliable person. So what then do we do if we have an unserious, unreliable president? When you look at the actuality of the situation, you find that the reassuring concept is floating above the complexity of our real world. We're in a theater of deception, a theater of pretense. Well, America is the biggest democracy in the world, but maybe the election practices are not exactly democratic because you need a lot of money to enter into politics. And you have to please people who have power. You want to fight for universal justice. Well, the political system is based on self-interest. This is a nightmare. It's very difficult with your human intelligence, with your desire to live a good life, to make the choices which are going to bring universal harmony. Goodwill is not enough. We can't all just hold hands in a circle because the faults are structural. The basic structural fault is duality. And duality means the unique specificity of things, of items, which mark them apart from other things or items. But what is that for each of us? What is it that makes me, me? Well, I have my thoughts. And in my body, my sensations. These are different from what you experience. My thoughts are mine. But when you sit and just allow your thoughts and feelings and memories and sensations to arise, they come and they go. They were only mine in the moment that they appeared, and then they're gone. Not here, here, not here. The qualities that I have, that I could take to be significant in terms of my self-definition, are evoked or arise with circumstances. As these circumstances change, the patterning of my manifestation changes. I have no fixed content. I can be happy, I can be sad, I can be proud, I can be shy. Each of these is manifesting according to patterning of circumstances. This arises for me, as me, yet it is not mine. If you are interested, try to stay with this and examine it very precisely in your own lived existence. The construction of myself, the aspects of my past that I hold on to, the plans that I would like to fulfill in the future are all factors shaping my sense of self. And these patterns keep changing. I am the site of the manifesting of diverse patterns. Sometimes the patterns seem to arise from me going out to the world. And sometimes they seem to be arising from the world coming into me. Both aspects are dynamic manifestation. There is no essence to them. Just as each wave in the ocean is there with its own, if you like, existence, and yet each and every wave is not other than the water of the ocean. In the same way, the thoughts, the feelings, the memories, the intentions which seem to shape myself, my wave, which gives me my identity, these, sorry, on you go. These formations are transitory. That is to say, I don't first have an internal shape of me and then bring it out into the world. But in relation to the factors of the field, the environment, that which I'm part of, I am receiving and responding, receiving and responding. The big waves of life are manifesting and dissolving, manifesting and dissolving. My breath is coming in and going out. I am a pulsation amongst pulsations. And the patterning of the pulsation provides a basis for the false interpretation that there is something there. That is to say, I am part of the ceaseless flow of experience, but I'm not a self-existing entity. How I manifest doesn't just depend on me. I move in a field of forces, or I am a force moving in a field of forces. So if you're swimming in the sea, as your hands and legs move, the water moves with you. There is patterning without existence. Patterning is undeniable. But the pattern doesn't imply that there is something with true existence. So we see a tree. The tree's roots go into the earth and bring up water. The leaves communicate with the air to produce oxygen. Neither the tree nor the earth nor the sky are fixed things. They are movements. It is a relational field composed of waves or gestures of relating. It is not composed of things. So we take a break now. If you go to eat something, you can, maybe you look in the fridge, you see there are different possibilities. The shape of what is in the fridge comes to you through your eyes, maybe through your nose as well. You're drawn towards something, and then you engage with that and prepare it and eat it. And this involves transformation. You put the food in your mouth, you chew it. This is also transformation. You digest it, and then later you go to the toilet and you relieve yourself of these aspects you don't need. This is a field of movement. We have the peristalsis of swallowing and excreting. That is to say, the tubes which constitute us are pulsatory. I am movement. I am not a fixed thing. So this is the basis for entering into the view of Dzogchen. There is no substantial, reified basis on which things are built up, but rather we inhabit space, and the profound aspect of ourselves is space, and within that, many patterns of manifestation occur. Okay, so now we take a break for lunch, and in the afternoon we look more directly at Dzogchen. So thank you to all our translators, and we meet in an hour. Good. Bye. Okay. So now we look at the second aspect, which is effortless non-selectivity. Effort requires an agent and something which is acted upon. I will do something to you or something for you. So I will apply myself to this task. I am acting on something. So for that to occur, there has to be something for me to act on. So some people think, I want to harm you. I want to steal your country. I want to steal your money. I want to steal your partner. Or it could be that I want to help you. I want to give you some money. I want to feed you, and so on. So this dualistic agency can be beneficial for the other. But if it's operating on the basis that self and other are real and separate, then it remains within the framework of duality of this is not that, that is not this. So how could I benefit beings without effort? That could be by helping them to awaken to the nature of how they are. So if you are hungry and I feed you, I do something for you, but that activity arises and vanishes. It may be very, very helpful if you are starving, if you're really hungry and I give you some food, that could be wonderful. But it wouldn't last for long. Because actions always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So when we see words like effortless, it indicates activity arising without the controlling or directing impact of an agency acting on something. It just happens. When children are small and they're learning to use the toilet, this depends on them being able to recognize some sign from their bladder or their bowels that they need to go to the toilet. The message in the body is saying, you must do this. And of course, sometimes there are mistakes. The child doesn't recognize that they need to go to the toilet, or they don't get there in time. So we try to gently support and encourage them to be more mindful of what's happening in the bladder and the bowel. So if you're going out with the child, you say, you need to go to the toilet. And they say, no. And we say, are you sure? Maybe we should just go and see. And of course, this can be narcissistically very wounding for the child. They have a body. They like to run around and shout and so on. but they're not in control at first of when they need to pee. So a lot of early education is about paying attention to the signs in your body, in your mind, in the environment that indicate what needs to be done. Well, very often you have to spend a lot of time helping children to get ready for school. And we say you're going to be late, which doesn't mean too much to the child. It means something to the adult. You don't want to have to go into the playground when no one else is there. All on your own. No, we want to get there while the children are still in the playground. So then with the embarrassment of accidents and repeated attempts, you become quite efficient at the management of your embodied being. And this is not the same. This efficiency, this ability to act in a way that doesn't have mistakes or errors, this is not the same as Dzogchen effortlessness. This is the development of a skill base through repetition. And it works for a while, but as we get older, the bladder and muscles get a bit weaker. And so you can get the return of an anxiety. Am I going to be okay? Because when we become efficient at doing something, we often forget how many hours of practice were involved in getting to that point. What we experience is the product, the outcome of our own focused practice. But in Dzogchen, effortlessness is linked to the three aspects of openness, luminosity, and co-emergent participation. That is to say, my belonging in the world, not the world as revealed to me through my cognitive analysis and use of concepts, but my participation as revealed through how I move in contact with the phenomena around me. All the shapes in the world, the shapes you find in the kitchen, the shapes you find in your shoes, at work, all of these shapes are an invitation for you to collaborate. When we collaborate, we work with the potential of the situation. For example, in my experience, Japanese chopsticks tend to come to a sharp point at one end, and Chinese have more straight edges going to the end. And the Japanese ones are often kind of lacquered on the outside, so they're very smooth and shiny. So I personally find the Chinese ones easier to hold and use. Because when we collaborate with something, we have to find the way in which I, with my particular history, my particular embodiment, can collaborate with these phenomena. So if somebody is showing you how to eat with chopsticks for the first time, they're showing you, don't fight with the chopstick, make friends with it. That is to say, the first step is not my intention to use the chopsticks. The first step is, how are chopsticks? How would these two pieces of bamboo fit with my hand? How does my hand have to be in order to hold the chopsticks? That is to say, I receive, I respond. So if I have truly received the quality of the chopstick, and what it's going to be used for, because if I'm trying to catch dim sum which are floating in the soup, that's quite slippery. The pastry will be slippery. This is not a matter of learning the theoretical basis of chopstick usage. Rather, when you put your chopsticks in the soup, in the slippery surface of the dough that has them sliding off, you need to work with that. How it is how it is. This is it. So I am encountering this set of possibilities. How do I fit? So however the object, if you like, is, however the arising event is, I want to see as precisely as possible its shape, its patterning, and then I respond. I come after the event, or just with the event. I have to collaborate with how it is. I'm not the boss. I'm not in charge. I'm not making it happen the way I want it to happen. But I have to find a way to make it work. Now we see with the many wars and conflicts which are occurring, that it's very difficult for warring groups to collaborate with each other. I start with a clarity of definition. You are the enemy. You have done bad things. You are in the wrong. And therefore, I need to make you apologize or suffer. That is to say, knowing who and what you are, I need to decide what to do with you. This is the discourse of power. We see this in politicians everywhere. They want to tell the other person what to do, to criticize them, and not to experience any criticism in return. I am the boss. I am the master. This is the true functioning of the ego self. The ego self has an agenda. I must win. When two forces meet each other, if the structure is that of conflict, then winning and losing is the contested situation. I want to win, I don't want to lose. And of course, the winner and the loser are separated by this outcome. The winner gets to stand on the podium and everybody claps, but the loser has to walk away in silence and try to hide their sadness and shame. So there you see that structure makes collaboration very, very difficult. We can, one side can, if one party to the conflict has good communication, they can decide to collaborate together in the task of defeating the enemy. So the members of NATO will collaborate together to stop the Russians expanding in Ukraine. But the new king arrives and he says, oh, the one you think is the enemy is actually our friend. And the one you think is our friend is actually our enemy, because they want to start the Third World War. How very dangerous. So, as long as the understanding of the situation is based on concepts, it will move towards polarization of good, bad, my friends, my enemies, and so on. That is to say, if you take sides, if you have a partiality that says this group is better than that group, or this group is my group and not that group, then you will be drawn into conflict. Non-selectivity is the basis for effortlessness. When we say, may all sentient beings be happy, we are saying something very profound. We are transcending our own history and the whole conceptual apparatus with which we understand our life. May my enemies be happy. May the people I disagree with at work be happy. May the people who invade my country and rape and kill be happy. This all-embracing, all-inclusive bodhisattva attitude is extremely challenging. When we look around the world, we can see that it's quite rare for people to get justice. People who are illegally put in prison, who are tortured, who have their land stolen from them and so on, they very rarely get justice. And if you try to enforce justice, that is often seen as a hostile act by the other side, and so you just have a further continuation of conflict. May all beings be happy. In the Tibetan, they would say, Semchen Tamche, may all those with minds be happy. The mind has two aspects. It has the basic lucidity or openness or clarity of awareness. And then there is the content of the mind. The content of the mind changes. So if on the basis of the patterns of interpretation which I have developed about you is taken by me to be the truth of the situation, then I know who you are. You are the terrorist, you are the thief, you are the rapist. And I say that on the basis of observing your activity. You do these bad things. That is a sign that you have a bad essence or a bad core. Bad people do bad things. If I steal from you and I'm caught, then everyone knows, oh, he is a thief. Maybe I have only stolen this one time. But because I have been seen doing the stealing, I can now be described as a thief. The thiefness, the inner essence of thief, is the source which gives rise to my action to steal from you. Now, this is erroneous from the Dharma point of view. Yes, there was stealing. Stealing is an action of subject onto object. I stole the object because I wanted it, because it has high value for me. But other people don't feel the necessity to steal. So they see the object that I steal and they don't steal. The qualities of the object didn't make me steal. I stole because of a conjunction of many different factors. My impulsivity, my sense of entitlement, my lack of consideration for you, and the opportunity that you weren't looking at thing I stole. So from this general Buddhist point of view, the stealing arises due to the conjunction or the meeting together or the functioning together of these different factors. So then, instead of saying James is a thief, we might say James does the activity of thieving, of stealing. But the second sentence is not complete. James does the activity of stealing from time to time according to circumstances. It's not something he always does. It is situational rather than essential. So we see in the world with people accused of being terrorists, people being accused of of murderous behavior, of horror. These ways of conceptualizing lead us towards believing there is some core badness in that person. So, according to the tradition, all compounded phenomena arise from causes. They don't manifest out of one single essence. And so the issue is about working with the dynamic flow of what we might take to be internal factors and external factors, so that there is the non-activation of the inessential. Therefore, there is no basis for saying, you are a thief, you're a rapist, you are my enemy. From time to time, you do things I don't like. From time to time, I do things you don't like. That is to say that our collaboration is a bit kind of bumpy. It's not very smooth. So when I do things which upset you, if we examine ourselves in this situation, we see that I was acting from me onto you, me first. I exist. What do I want from you? This is the discourse of the ego. It's not collaboration. With collaboration, we say, okay, let's see what's possible. We stay as relaxed and loose and flexible as possible, and we engage in the moving field of experience. Because if I start with collaboration, my attention is on the midpoint where we connect. I'm not starting from myself as the subject going to act on you, nor am I starting with you as the subject who is going to act on me as the object. And when I'm connected with you, the flow of connective energy is hardly effortful at all. But of course, it tends to require the letting go of our habit formations and our criteria for evaluation. So say we decided we're going to cook a vegetarian stew together. So you're going to chop the onions and I'm chopping the carrots. So chop, 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 I do my job. But then you say to me, James, why have you made the pieces so big? Why would you do that? This is not how we make the stew. Oh, I'll have to do it again. So then collaboration is very hard. Because the other side of collaboration is, it's only truly possible when I give you the freedom to do what you do in your way. With the view of Dzogchen, we collaborate, we work together, but with the sense that it's okay however it is. Because the key point is the collaboration, the being together, the body is working in some kind of harmony, not the outcome. It's not about the product. Now, most of the things in our world are about the product. Our consumerist capitalist economy is endlessly inventing new products for us to purchase. But we are concerned about the process of collaboration, of co-emergence, of the non-split or non-oppositional interaction of subject and object, because life goes on. And if we stay, as it were, in the game, in the flow, then the game changes, the patterns change, but we find ourselves still as participants. The texts say there is no end to samsara. Life goes on. That doesn't mean we're trapped in samsara. It means it's like a very big river. Don't try to swim up the river. Work with the flow. Find a way to bring yourself into a relationship with the energy of the situation. Because if we are participating and focusing on how the bodies move together, whether it's dancing or making love or cooking or cleaning, gardening, whatever it is the joint movement which is so very important. That is to say, I am going to join you in the movement. You are already part of the movement. I am already part of the movement. We are moving in the moving field, which is the site of the manifestation of our patterning. We don't begin at the beginning. When the baby is born, when the baby comes out of the mother's body, this is not the beginning. There has been 9 months of transformation inside the mother's body. And before that, the moment of conceptualization, the arrival of the consciousness and the female essence and the male essence, and their movement together is the beginning of the life of the developing fetus. When you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, it's a new day, the farmers are already out on their tractors. The fishermen are coming back into port having been fishing all night. We are part of the world in which these activities are going on. So rather than starting inside the sense of myself as a separate entity, I awake into my belonging. I awaken where I am. I am the energy of the ground, the energy of the Dharmakaya, participating through interaction with other forms, each of which is the energy of the Dharmakaya. I'm already on the inside. So, some of you are very familiar with the Dzogchen account of the arising of unawareness. There is a first, the mind itself is infinite. It's not a thing. It's not a thing standing in relation to other things. Within this awareness, which is without limit, without beginning or end, we can find our presence. That is to say, relaxed, at ease, open, as openness. And this openness is the space within which different experiences arise. And like an apparition, like an illusion, like a ghostly formation, we manifest into the world with these shapes. The formations, the forms that we manifest in relation to other forms don't show us the truth of who we are or what we are. Rather, they show us how we are. We are with this pattern at this moment. And this pattern arises due to or in harmony with the other patterns. Patterning is co-emergent, not uni-emergent. So that when I walk, I'm walking with the world. Now, you might say, oh, James is walking. That's quite a simple sentence. If we say, James is walking with the pavement, that sounds a little bit stupid. But the fact is, I'm always walking somewhere. And how I'm walking is dependent on the surface of the road. I am often very envious of small children. Because when I walk up to the shops, I see these children, maybe 3 years of age, walking beside their mum. And then suddenly, for no reason that I can see, they start to hop. I also would like to hop, but I don't quite feel the naturalness. It would feel like something quite artificial. But for the 3-year-old, hopping is just something you do from time to time. And if you were to ask them, why are you hopping? They're likely to look at you as if you are very strange. Because they hop when they hop. And they don't hop when they don't hop. It's just like that. So, as we become more socialized, we become more aware of the choreography of our gender, our age, our class, and so on, which strongly influences our freedom to join in a more expressive participation. So for the small child, they receive the impulse and they manifest through it. And in Dzogchen, we want to receive the field, the world in its complex integrity, and respond into it. How shall we behave? Let's see. If we let the mood of the situation come close to us, merge into us, then from that coalescence, our behavior manifests. So what this is highlighting is effort begins with the individual, isolate entity person. What shall I do? So children often say, Mom, Dad, what shall I do? I'm bored. See, they're saying, I don't find the way into this moment. I want something to happen. I want to do what is good for me. But they're not sure how to do that. There needs to be an invitation. So the mom might say, okay, let's go into the garden and we're going to gather some flowers. We're going to do it together. I'm interested in the kind of flowers you would choose. And because the grown-up is interested in the child gets more interest in the project. And the basis of the dissolving of this tower of the isolated ego is the invitation. Let's do it together. Come on, this'll be fun. So inclusivity is another word for Dzogpa Chimbo. Everything is on the inside. All phenomena or all dharmas are already within the Dharma Dhatu, the space of dharmas. The key thing is to find ourselves on the inside. The door is open. The welcome is here. Come in. So what is the limitation on my participation? There are many aspects to this. One is I know what I like. That's not the way I like it. Over the years, I have known quite a few women who have gone to the hairdresser and who then come home and look in the mirror and they are very unhappy. Oh, they took off too much, or they didn't take off enough. So then they go to another hairdresser to try to correct what is wrong, because they want to have the right appearance. But their appearance doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the people who see their appearance. Unless you're going to look in a mirror all day long, you hardly ever see yourself. Other people see you. So in that sense, you could say your appearance belongs to them. They are the audience for your appearance. But I'm concerned about how you will see my appearance. But I don't know what criteria you will use to evaluate my appearance. If I don't like my haircut, and you say it's fine, then maybe I will hate you, because I know it's very bad. I don't want to look like this. Now, the key thing here is I have become an object for myself. And my sense of myself as an object does not determine how other people will see me. I don't know how I should be for you. So if I am concerned about my appearance, if I'm seeing myself as a performative being, then I'm having to make decisions about how I should behave. Now, if we're thinking about non-selectivity, there's clearly a problem. So you come back from the hairdresser, you look in the mirror. Wow, I wasn't expecting this. How is it? Oh, I don't like it. That's not the question. How is it? Can you see? Or has your judgment arrived before your actual seeing because you imagined it would be in another way? So the non-selectivity is to allow life to be as life is. Sometimes life is easy, sometimes not. Sometimes we're healthy, sometimes we're not. How is it? It is as it is. It's not how I wanted it. So it's exactly on this point that you can see whether you are merged in your egoic self or you have started to find some freedom. This is not what I wanted. How is it? Oh, I'm too upset to think about it. I don't like it. So seeing, simple seeing has become impossible because judgment has been put on the throne. The judgment kills the situation. I know what it is and it's terrible. I can't bear this. How could they have done this? Well, they have a different mind. They have a different idea. Well, I don't want that. I want them to do just what I say. It is how it is. This is difficult because when you start to look in this situation, you start to be able to contact the judgments, the values, the strong opinions which you have stored inside yourself. And when this is the case, we tend not to hear the question very clearly. How do you feel about your new haircut? It's terrible. So that's not exactly answering the question. Because it's saying the haircut, the object is terrible. And the question is, how do you feel about it? Oh, I don't feel too happy. What's happening? Well, I hadn't wanted it this short. So when you look in the mirror, how do you feel about the length? It's too short. Are you sure? It's different. So you have an echo memory of how your hair was before you went to the hairdresser. And you're comparing how your hair is now to how it was before. It is what it is. It is how it is. What about me? My opinion. It is how it is. What does your opinion do in relation to how it is? I'm judging it as being not good. I don't like how I look. But how do you look? I'm disappointed. It is quite difficult for us to just simply see. If we see, this is it. If we judge, if we theorize, if we apply concepts, we then have comparing and contrasting and hierarchies of evaluation. That is to say, there is something to be judged. But if we see that it's just this, then this is not an object, it's an appearance. Okay? And because the hair will keep growing, it will change. It's a moment in the history of the many different shapes and patterns I have shown. So, how can I relax into non-selectivity? We'll look at that after the break. So we have a half-hour pause, and then we have the last session. Good. Thank you. Okay. So, how is it possible to trust effortlessness? Because effortlessness is linked to the intrinsic. Intrinsic means it's already here. It's not something to be added. It is complete. So when we say Dzogpa Chenpo, Dzogpa means complete, nothing more to be done. And Chenpo means great or complete in emptiness. Because emptiness is always complete. Emptiness means there is nothing there to be split. But we have to be clear that emptiness is not like a kind of inclusive collective noun. So it's not like going out into the countryside and saying how wonderful nature is. These are all aspects of nature. Because when we say this, it is as if nature is somehow the essence of all of these things. These are all subsets or variations on the theme of nature. It's not that everything is to be included within emptiness. Emptiness is not a concept. It's what we see directly when we examine the status of our experience. When we have duality, we have this thing is not that thing. An apple is not a pear. But in terms of emptiness, there is no appleness to the apple. The quality of the apple arises on dependent origination, which means it has no internal essence of its own. These patterns moving together create the semblance of something being there. So if you go to the sea or a big lake and you see the waves coming, you can see the shape of the waves. Some are a bit bigger than others. So there is some possibility of comparing and contrasting different waves. And yet, each wave has no separate existence. They are the existence of water. In the same way, all phenomena are empty. This emptiness is like the water, and they are formations of the emptiness. Nothing else is added. It's just a patterning. Emptiness doesn't mean that there is nothing there. It means that there is no self-existing thing there, but there is a shape and probably color, and that has an impact. This is the diversity of our experience. We have so many experiences, and they all vanish. The memory of a place is not the same as being in that place. The memory is a conceptual mental representation. Our language is a little bit confusing at this point, because we say representation, as if something is being represented. We ate some of the pie last night, but I'm going to heat it again for this evening. I'm going to represent the pie. It's the same pie as yesterday. Now, of course, we know that if we cook something on Friday but eat it on Saturday, often the flavor is improved. Although we say the pie, it's not an inanimate object. It's in conversation with the air that's around, whether it's warm or damp or whatever. That is to say, from the Dharma point of view, representation is an illusion. We see pictures of Padmasambhava. Oh, this is Padmasambhava. No, this is a picture. And somebody says, this is a picture of Padmasambhava. He never changes. He doesn't even change his socks, which might make us a little bit concerned about domestic relations in Zangdo Pauri. He is always the same. This is a skillful method to give us the sense of object constancy, so we know what Padmasambhava looks like. But actually, Padmasambhava shows many different forms. All forms are Padmasambhava. I'm just looking for this. Padmasambhava said regarding Padmasambhava initiation. The vows from this empowerment are as follows. All that you see, both the world and its inhabitants, is to be seen as the body of Padmasambhava. So the cars, the trees, the messy gardens that people have in wintertime, all of this is Padmasambhava. So if everything looks like Padmasambhava, you can't know what he looks like. It looks like Padmasambhava because Padmasambhava has no shape. There is no true Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava is the Nirmanakaya illusion which manifests in order to bring us back to our own unchanging ground. So, from this tantric point of view, when we say that all that we see is the form of Padmasambhava, or all that we hear is the mantra of Padmasambhava, means Padmasambhava is beyond thought. Just as we were looking earlier, if you have Japanese chopsticks or Chinese chopsticks, you hold them slightly differently. The shape of your hand is in collaboration with the kind of chopstick you have. That is to say, we are part of the ceaseless formation of Padmasambhava through the interaction of the many illusory forms which are inseparable from emptiness. Okay. It's quite a long day. So non-selectivity means everything I see is Padmasambhava. Now, if everything is Padmasambhava, how will I select one form being better than another? We are very good at making such discriminations. So Nyima Osa looks like a wild yogi. Some of the other forms look like a monk or a quiet king. Which one do you prefer? Why would I prefer it? That, if you did feel a strong preference, that would be an aspect of how your personality resonates with this particular form of the deity. But since all forms are forms of Padmasambhava, we cannot say that one form is inherently better than another. But you might, if you have many difficulties in your life, you might want to do some wrathful practice like Dorje Trollo in order to manifest a powerful energy that you feel could help you impact and change the structure of your difficulty at work. But Chenrezig could also change the situation. The fact that we might feel more secure with some angry deity with flames all around, holding big weapons, we might feel, oh, I want that person on my team, not this peaceful Chenrezig. That is a sign of our misunderstanding. So if we looked at this in terms of Dzogchen, the founding Buddha is Samantabhadra, always good, good everywhere at all times. This means exactly Kada, primordial purity. That is to say, having no distinguishing features which distinguish real differences. So the different Nirmanakaya deities have different forms, But these forms don't establish any true difference between them because they are all appearance and emptiness. When we have difficulty, say, at work, or we don't like being with a particular colleague, this is a sign of our own limitation. I don't like them. They keep saying things I don't agree with. When we have this kind of experience, it's generating the idea, I know what this person is like. They're always the same. I know what they're like. I know what they're like because they're like that with me, and I take up a fixed position. If I want things to change, rather than trying to change the other person, I can look for what is it that has me trapped in my particular fixation or formulation. My fault is that I am starting with the conclusion. This is how they are. Full stop. I'm telling you, this is how they are. There's nothing to be done. Two things are happening in this moment. I am abandoning them and their potential, but I'm also abandoning myself. I'm coming into this shaping where I'm saying, I don't even want to be in the same room as them. They annoy me so much. I have got trapped. I can untrap myself. So, in our practice, we do the Guru Yoga of the white R. We sit in a relaxed way. Visualize the white letter R briefly with the rainbow potential around it, and then we make the sound of R 3 times. And we do this to relax and release ourselves from our fixations. Because every fixation is a foreclosure of the potential of the situation. There is nothing to be done. Whenever we hear our mind formulating this, or we hear ourselves saying it, we need to see, oh, I am solidifying the situation. So we can we could do the Guru Yoga of the white R together just now, and then just sit in openness for a little bit. Okay. Okay. So with this very simple practice, there are 3 aspects. The first is just open. Make the sound, come to the end of the sound, and nothing at all, just open. Then you become aware of the thoughts, memories, plans, and so on, things arising and passing. If you don't enter into what is occurring, it will vanish by itself. It's not a thing. If you eat a banana, you then need to work out what to do with the banana skin. There is a residue, a wrapping that you don't want. You want the thing inside the banana. But when we do the practice, we let go of all the conceptual interpretation. And the skin or the wrapping or the concept by which we feel that we know what something is or how it is, if we just sit with that, it dissolves. So when we read in the general Mahayana text that all appearances, all compounded things have no inherent existence, it's indicating exactly this. The existence or the sustained appearance is not held in place by something. It's just due to causes and conditions. It's like this, and then it vanishes. That is to say, whatever pattern of memory or concept or feeling arises in my mind, even when it seems very dense, very familiar, I know what this is, if we simply stay relaxed with it, it will dissolve. Why does it dissolve? Because it had no integrity. For example, if Mr. Trump says America is tired of giving money for this war in Ukraine, this cuts across the trajectory of the idea that America is with us in NATO and will protect all our interests. How could he say he's not going to do it? In exactly the same way that Joe Biden said, I am going to do it. If you say yes, then someone else can say no. Even if 100 million people say yes, 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 it can still become no. Because there is no inherent existence in any structure. This is the most important point for us to see in terms of the practice. The ground or the basis or the source is open and empty. There is no foundational entity. When unawareness arises in the mind, it arises as this, here, me, some kind of very brief but powerful sense of here is an existent. And this existent, this thing which seemingly has its own existence, sustains this flavor or sense despite the fact that it has no essence itself. Because the thought, I am, I exist, I'm James, I'm tired, I'm sick, all of these are expressions dissolving. So if you feel thirsty, you can go into your kitchen. You take a cup and you put some water and you drink the water. This is my favorite cup. I really like using this cup. I'm talking about the cup for me, not the cup as cup. I'm already merging my thoughts about the cup into the cup. This is my special cup. That is an idea. The idea arises, and after a few seconds, it vanishes. And each of these thoughts acts as a kind of confirmation that there are truly existing objects out there and a truly existing subject in here. And every time this confirmation is applied, it gives a bit more opacity. It's more impenetrable because it seems to have an existence of its own. That is to say, all representations are representation of the concept, not of the actual. When we look and we see this, then we realize, oh, I am like one of these Egyptian mummies. I'm wrapped and wrapped and wrapped in these bandages of my own concepts, my own beliefs. When there is a kind of tension between the fresh and the familiar, I'm likely to choose the familiar because it confirms the status of the ego self. I, me, myself, I know who I am. I know that I live in London. I know many, many things. The continuity of myself is the ongoing telling and retelling of the stories about myself. We tell the story, we repeat the story. I am my story. The thing about stories is that it is as if they can be repeated. So if I say, I lived in India in the past, and you remember that, and then you tell someone else, oh, James used to live in India. Do any of these statements have a referent? What is this India that I used to live in? My India has vanished. So if I take a plane to India, I arrive in India, but not my India, because I don't know Delhi anymore and I don't know the train system anymore. And it's a long time ago. So the semantic web, the web of meaning generated by and held in place by signs and symbols, this is substituted as a false indicator of clarity. Because if we do a little bit of practice and we study and we reflect on our daily experience, we might get some insight. I see that whatever it is that constitutes I, me, myself is a flow of ungraspable experiences. Now, we all have a body, so we are familiar with the fact that sometimes we have pain in the body. So if I say, oh, my back is a bit sore, it is as if I'm saying something meaningful. And you might say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But what is the status of this pain in my back? When I get up and move about, it's likely to disperse. It's an experience which is a movement of time. And that movement of time is not in time. When we rest, when we do the Guru Yoga of the White R, and we rest in openness, the freshness of here and now, what arises can be unexpected moments, but also very familiar moments. Even the familiar moment has not occurred before. It is similar, but it's not the same. All my thoughts, all my memories, all my feelings are aspects of the patterning which generate my capacity to be in the world with others. The thoughts and feelings arise and vanish. So the Tibetan texts say, Rang Sha, Rang Dro, self-arising and self-liberating or self-vanishing. No one is doing them or making them happen. They arise and are gone. They haven't arisen into existence. It's not that they go from non-existence to existence. They are neither existent nor non-existent. They are not things. They are experiences. And the experiences keep coming and coming and coming and coming. And the ground of each of these experiences, the open, empty ground, nothing comes from nothing. Oh, but what about all the somethings? The true nature of all somethings is nothing. Oh, I'm getting old, and I will vanish from this world. I don't know when, but for sure it's getting nearer. We say, I will die. Who will die? This person will die. Oh God, but James, you're not a person. You're not the five skandhas. You don't exist, James. Or at least you exist as the illusion of James. So when the illusion of James dissolves and dies, who dies? Nobody dies. What you have is changing experience, changing experience. Our whole life is a process or a flow of ungraspable moments of experience. So many worlds I have inhabited, which objectively are gone and subjectively I couldn't enter into. The places where I was have changed. The person who I was has changed. So it's not that I was young and now I'm not young. I have an older person's life. When we talk in this way, we seem to be saying something meaningful because I seem to be referring to something. But what I'm referring to is the complex traces of memory. Memory is not even like a photograph. It's a shifting potential. It's like a collage. And so my memories of events shift due to my health, what mood I'm in, what the context is, who I'm talking to. All of these formations were there and gone, there and gone. The concept is not the same as the actual. You can't eat a concept. And with most kinds of food, you can't keep them too long. The banana is not ripe, and then it ripens, and then it's very ripe, too ripe. The banana is a process, it is not a thing. I am a process, I'm not a thing. I was young, now I'm not young. That is the process of interaction in the environment. Patterns arise from interaction. Nothing is created. Nothing is born except patterns. And if you observe the energy of the patterning arising, you can have many feelings about this particular patterning, yet nothing is established, nothing comes into true existence. Or you can look at patterns of the clouds in the sky. You can identify shapes as being like the shape of something that seems to be like an elephant. But nothing is established. If you go to the cinema, you see many rippling images coming on the screen. The meaning of the film is in the movement. The images move, my feelings move, my thoughts move. This is a joint movement or an interactive movement. So, if I am clear that all experience has exactly this quality of absence of inherent existence, ungraspability, then I can just allow it, experience to come and go. In that there are many, many flavors to experience. We know that life can be painful or difficult. Maybe our life is generally good. Then you get some news. Oh, you have cancer. Why me? Why not me? Why would I not experience these things? Oh, but you are a Buddhist. Doesn't that protect you from cancer? No. Anyone can get anything. You may have a door with a key on your house, but you don't have any door with a key on your mind. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, sicknesses blow in effortlessly. So if you can be non-judgmental, and with that non-selective, and you see that there is only one ground, and everything which occurs is like the capacity of that ground to show non-entities or appearances which are not the appearance of something, you see, oh, it's all just passing through. And there is a place for me. My place is right at the center of everything which is occurring. What I take myself to be appears and dissolves. What I take you to be appears and dissolves. I'm not in charge. I'm not the owner or the maker of these patterns. And yet they are me. So without making it too solid or without making it not solid or non-existent, we follow the middle way, free of the extremes. It's just this. It's just this. But what is it? It's not a what. If you ask what, who, why, when, where, these questions will all bring you into the domain of the map. But if you stay present, relaxed, and open with the immediacy of your experience, and you focus on how lets you stay with the dynamic movement of the self-arising, self-dissolving. So I don't need to select, because there aren't entities that I prefer this thing to that thing. All experiences arise and vanish by themselves as illusions. So when we look back on our lives, we have some recollection of happy times, sad times, falling in love, having a broken heart, doing well at work, getting in trouble at work. These were all experience passing through. Whatever you say about them will be false, because the representation and the actual are not the same. Knowing a person's name is not the sign of knowing the person. On the basis of knowing the person's name, you can build up a sense of who they are, what they like, what they don't like. But if we relax in that moment and don't build up a pattern or an interpretation about who the person is, then you commit yourself to being present. I am here with you. How are we? Let's see. It is a revelation. The revelation of patterns of experience, not the revelation of entities. No entities have ever been revealed since the beginning of time. So effortlessness is not starting with a plan, not starting with a sense of agency. I'm going to make it happen this way. But rather we are relaxing and we are being part of the unfolding flow. So, you can read about this and so on, but the key thing is to observe yourself. Whatever foundation you might find that you want to build your house on is impermanent. Oh, I don't feel very well. Oh, James, are you going to be sick for a while? And then what will you be? Yeah, but I'm sick now. Poor me. What about me? But you don't exist. Oh, you mean I have to say goodbye to sympathy? You mean I have to just stay relaxed and open and fresh and available for participation? Oh yeah, that's much better. All definitions are prisons. Freedom is to stay with the patterning of experience without getting rid of it and without solidifying it, rarefying it. So that brings us to the end for today. The topic is a little bit solid, so I hope it doesn't feel too heavy. And of course, because I'm not so healthy at the moment, my mood is also a little bit dull. That's part of it. All the factors operate together to generate these ungraspable moments. So thank you to our translators. It's a long day for them. And thank you to Pedro for keeping the system going. And to Milton and Zhao, who work in the background to facilitate things. And of course, thanks to you for your participation. It's not an easy thing to stay connected with the unfolding of how these Dharma ideas fit together. So I wish you good luck with your practice. And hopefully you will turn into bright shining flowers. And we shall all be happy forever and ever and ever. Oh, maybe that's the wrong religion. So very nice to spend some time with you, and we have some other items coming up on the website. Good. Pleasure. Bye for now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. James, thank you so much.
Bye, James.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, James.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Lovely.